Welcome back, everyone. We're basically at the end of our growing season for the tomatoes, so I thought I'd go back and review what's happened here for the past couple months and show what our tomatoes are currently doing. This video is brought to you by our Patreon contributors. Our top tier contributors are TrueAquaponics.com, GlassBottleOutlet.com, GreenLifePlanet.net, and GrowPockets.com. I'll leave a link to all these websites in the description below.
It didn't take very long for these tomatoes to outgrow their new height, and they're now up above the maximum height of my line, so I'm going to try lowering them down and start coiling up the vine down along the bottom. I'm hoping I did this the right way, and I'm assuming if I untie that, this should start to lower down. One of the issues with having my plants too close together is that they do get caught up in with each other a little bit. I still find these suckers I completely miss. It doesn't take them very long to grow up. Then down below we will very carefully move the vine, and we're going to start coiling it up. So I get enough of a complete loop, I'm going to climb back up and lower this down a little bit more. I wasn't overly thrilled that these tomatoes aren't quite ready. I didn't want them sitting here, but it's starting to ripen up, so in a week or so that will be all set and it'll come off. So it looks like I lowered this one about 3 feet or a yard, which was enough to get a loop in the bottom. So I'll do this one about the same amount. As I'm lowering the plants, I'm also removing any of the leaves that could come in contact down in with the water. They don't have much of a useful purpose, and a lot of them still have some of the powdery mildew, even though I've been treating for it. Once they get real low down to near the water, there's not as much airflow down here, and they just get diseased anyways. You can see I haven't been too bashful about pruning off the extra leaves. It's all done. It leaves the bottom area nice and open. If I had a little bit more height, I wouldn't have to rest all the tomatoes on the rafts, but they should be okay. So just while I was lowering down those plants, I did pick a few tomatoes off of them. 7, and I accidentally broke one off a little bit before it was done, but that will ripen up without any problem. So another 853 grams, or 1 pound, 14 ounces. One thing I have to watch out for is the tomatoes sometimes fall down into the water. It essentially just stops the development of the skin or something, and it sort of rots them out. It's been a problem because I'm not paying attention. Sometimes they actually just fall into the holes here and keep growing, but they are terrible, so I've just been picking them off and chucking them. Biggest problem that I've been having is just as tomatoes are getting ripe, the woodchucks have been coming in because I leave the doors open at night to cool off the greenhouse. They just stroll right in and decide to make a tasty treat. This is one of my nice larger tomatoes, and they seem to snack on it. Even the green ones, they'll nibble on those a little bit too. Along with a couple ants here. Here's another one that they got. One thing I noticed while harvesting tomatoes, this vine here is snapped. I probably did it when I was lowering the plants down last time and broke it. The plant's still alive, so I haven't noticed anything, so it's not broken badly enough where it's not getting any nutrients or water to the rest of the plant. So we'll just leave it alone and hope I don't break it anymore. For an update on the plant that I topped off, it now has a really nice sucker coming out of it. Still pruning some off of here. It sends out zillions of them still. But the plant itself has sent up a nice long one. You can see I'm still suffering from some powdery mildew. We had a week or so of heavy rains and the humidity was just crazy high in here, and even with the fans going it was hard to keep it under control. And I also neglected spraying them as often as I should be, so they look pretty sad, but it's still alive. Every couple days I've been harvesting tomatoes. If they're almost ripe, I'll still pick them. I'm still having problems with some critter getting in here and eating them right before they're ripe, and I'm now starting to think it might be racoon. I have a camera set up to try to catch them just so I can see what I'm dealing with, and they're being very elusive on camera, so they must not be triggering the infrared sensor. Since I've neglected the plant so badly over the past couple weeks, spend some time tonight just cleaning off some of the dead and diseased branches. Try to get this cleaned up, and also try not to get the mildew to spread, but you just touch these things and you get a cloud coming off them, so there's not much you can do for it. The spray that I've been using has been working really well with it. Just have to keep up with it. As I was cleaning up branches, I noticed that this vine was basically dead, and getting down into here, it was all crinkled up and looks horrible. It looks like some kind of a borer got into it. There's a hole in the vine right here. So it's dead. So I'm going to prune off the tomatoes that I know will ripen up and then take the vine out. I'll just start by cutting out the center section to see if there's anything in the vine. Yeah, it's all hollow, so there's something that's crawled its way up into here. And there it is. You see here there's a bunch of poop or something from whatever was in there, and it probably matured and worked its way back out and flew off or crawled off or whatever. Even down along the base is all hollow, which is, I was a little bit surprised that something would come up through the roots unless it crawled right in through the base of the stem here, but it's definitely hollow all the way through. So I was wondering how I'm going to get the plant out with all the roots without destroying everything else, because they're all intertwined with each other. So I think I'm just going to leave them here and let them rot into the bed, because I don't want to take the risk of damaging the roots from the other plants. Now, this is the first time I've lowered the plants on this side of the greenhouse. I think I said in one of my earlier videos that these are running a few weeks behind, which still is the case. And I think this time when I lower these down, I'm going to lower them a little bit further. When I did the ones on the other side, I did break one of the vines because it coiled up too tight, so I lowered them about 3 feet last time, so maybe 4 feet I can get a little bit bigger coil and lessen the risk of breaking the vine. Just broke off a tomato. Maybe I'll bring it down even more. This top is a lot longer than I thought it was. Like I said earlier, I've been neglecting my plants a little bit. with tomatoes, that's not something you want to do because they're just going to keep on going. It is a little nerve-wracking taking these big vines and trying to move them and coil them up. Finally found out what's getting into our tomatoes during the night. Looks like we have a little rat problem. The rat traps have proven to be totally ineffective. I've been told that once they see one of their buddies get caught in a trap, then the rest of them are smart enough not to go in them anymore, unlike the mice where they just don't know that. So what I've done is I've resorted to using some decon poison. I'm not a big fan of using it. However, it has totally stopped our rat problem after a couple of weeks. They just gnaw at this and it poisons them. It's essentially an anticoagulant, so they hemorrhage to death. Not very pleasant, but very effective. This year is the first year I've ever had a problem with whiteflies in the greenhouse, and they've been all over the tomato plants and have not been able to keep them under control with just about anything. I've tried kapow, neem oil, insecticidal soaps, you name it, I think I've tried it. I have set some yellow traps that just helps to collect them, but it does not keep up with the infestation of the flies. A lot of my plants have finally succumbed to the powdery mildew. A lot of this is my own fault because I've spent more time putting up our new greenhouse than I have caring for the plants, but there's still a few tomatoes that are alive and coming in on these. Oddly enough, the one plant that I had originally broken off and let that sucker grow up has probably done the best out of all my plants, and is still producing some really nice looking tomatoes. Probably the best tomatoes out of all of my plants. I haven't been stringing it up like the other ones. I just let it grow along the wire here and just left it alone. This plant isn't blossoming anymore, so I'm just going to harvest what we have left on it for tomatoes and then pull it out. You might recall some of the plants. I used a grow grip just to hold the original plant in place, and then some are planted in a 2-inch net pot with some gravel. And once the plant gets large enough, the base really isn't supported anymore by either the pot or the grow grip. It's really relying on the string holding it up into place. So it's actually easier just to remove this grow grip. Even though it looks terrible, I'll be able to reuse that again. The net pots are holding on to everything, but it's still a big mess to have to try to get the plant out in there and not spill all the gravel. So I think next year I'm going to plant everything in the grow grips and make sure the plant is suspended well from its string. These white flies are horrible. I can't wait to get these plants out of here and get some cold weather and try to freeze them all out. One last thing, I wanted to show how much the yield was off these plants. Overall, there was 128 pounds or 58 kilograms harvested. And out of the roughly 20 plants, that's actually a fairly poor yield. When we first got it started, it was doing fairly well through here, and we were ramping it up. This spike here is where I harvested a whole bunch once we discovered there was a rat problem. And then from there, we really didn't recover. We had just lost so many of the tomatoes at that point. I was throwing away at least half of the tomatoes that were in here. and sometime in September I was able to rectify the rats, but the plants really never recovered from that. We're into September, a lot less sunlight, so the plants just don't grow like they did before, and they start getting leggy. So the rest of the harvest throughout the season was just what was ever left that had already fruited, and by the time you get into October there's just no new flowers coming out on the plant, so at that point it's a lost cause.
So that's the end of our tomato season this year. I spent a little time demucking this bed, and strangely enough I got 3 goldfish out of here. I'm not sure how they got in here because they have to get through a pump and then through the media bed and then into here. So most likely it was some fertilized eggs that got flushed through the system and they happened to hatch in here. So I'll probably spend some time going through my other beds to see if there's fish hiding in there too. A couple of lessons from this year. First, I think I'm going to increase the air that was in the beds. I did have some in, and over time some of the stones got a little bit clogged and weren't producing as much air as they should have been. I was starting to see a little bit of root rot towards the end. I also have to figure out how to deal with all these white flies. Hopefully this winter I can freeze out the greenhouse and get rid of them. This is the first time in about 8 years since I've had a white fly problem. Also, I think I'll space out the plants a little bit further away from each other next year. I had a fan blowing on half of them, and those did fairly well, and the half on this side of the greenhouse had a little bit more powdery mildew on it. Plus, with the spacing so tight, it was difficult to adjust the height of the plant from one plant to the other without the branches or leaves hitting against their adjacent neighbor. Even though the twine worked fairly well, I think I'll go with a standard commercial string and the clips used to hold the plants in next year. It's probably just not worth the aggravation to do the twine. It stretched a little bit. I was getting some rotting, which I showed in my previous video, and the clips would obviously be a whole lot faster to keep them secured to the line versus taking the time to tie everything up. But if you're on a really tight budget and you have a bunch of extra strings, the twine worked just fine. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed our year of growth in tomatoes. If you missed a few of the first videos, I'll leave a link to the entire playlist so you can go through the whole series.